So Caleb, hello.
Hello.
So you felt you wanted to talk about a subject today.
Yes. Um, I want to talk about the Draconians, the Draconian Lodge, which you mentioned before. Um, to work up to that, though, just to paint in some background, which we've covered a bit already. Um,
Yeah.
you 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 know you have information about what happened in 1050. Is that the correct date?
With
Uh,
the conversion
yeah, the
to
mat.
Catholicism.
It's well, I asked you before, when was the last time that the Swedish aristocracy actually was heathen? You said
Oh,
1050. Is that right?
well, 1050, the pagans sort of collapsed, or they had to
Okay.
convert to become Catholics
Right.
on the official. But I know that a lot of jarlar, it's a what you call it, like a title or a class of people from the heathendom that sort of they wasn't really converted to become Catholics, and
Okay.
this gave rise to the sort of the Freemasonry as we know it, or the networking, underground networking, as I see it, at least here in Sweden, uh, to sort of
Okay.
organize against the oppressors, or the converter, the religion, the Catholics, so, of course.
And that organization commenced in 1050, or shortly thereafter.
It could have been starting already before that, because Sweden, or the power in Sweden, the heathen, it's a very centralized system. So it's a very effective system also in form of information and so. So I think they were really organizing in before already, because I can see lodges from the 900s here in Sweden, late 900s.
Um, can you look up and see what the dates for the Crusades were? The first Crusades, because I can't remember right off the top of my head.
The Crusades on towards the north, like,
Towards the east, the famous Crusades.
oh,
'Cause this coincides as very important as well to some other patterns.
okay. The Crusades were a series of religious wars initiated, supported, and sometimes directed by the Latin Church in the medieval period. And it says here, these crusaders are those to the Holy Land. The best known of these crusaders are those to the Holy Land in the period between 1095 and 1291.
So those actually came after the Crusade to the north.
Yes.
Okay. So what's important for well, one of the important things for pagans is looking back to the pagan roots,
Yeah.
which to get a crystal clear view of, you would have to go back to before the creation of even the Christian church, right?
Well, the pagan symbols has been scattered all over the world. Uh, Especially like the swastika is a very common one. Uh,
Yeah, you have a lot of people today who want to explore what their ancestors were actually doing, what they
mm.
kind of actually practiced in the past. Um, where do they look to actually get a full view of like what they could do to sort of like bring that back into the present?
Well, I would recommend being becoming symbolic literate, especially from this, and be open to reinterpret it, because if you're so fixated on what a symbol is, means something that is written in like a book, I always keep my mind open, even though I read something that and I really warn about. That's what happened to me with this written books on the runes and what they mean, like from the Futhark stone found in Sweden, and those mystique or mysterious kind of books tells you very romantically about everything, and it's sort of what I felt when I read, especially by the time I read this, it's maybe like 10 years ago or something like that. By then it was very few books that I found on the subject, especially like in depth on the runes and what they actually mean. And what I'm trying to say is that I found that, first of all, the system that they are building the sort of understanding for, that is flawed if you look at the actual runestone. Like they have been swapping runes in the rune row, like to say it's a rune rad, but it means a rune row, and it's very important in the system, referring to them, which order
There's 3
the runes.
rows of 8, right?
Yeah, they divide it in 3 different sets, but it's very important what rune comes after the other, because they use some kind of tree of death symbol, like this, very similar to the tree of life symbol that the Hebrew structured their alphabet in. So they sort of took that system, like the Hebrews, and it's very similar. If you put the Hebrew alphabet next to the rune system, you can sort of see correlations, and I can see that they have been trying to port the understanding from the Hebrew to the runes. They're different, this kind of thinking, because I sort of understood why you did that, because everything is coming from the flower of life and the ring system. If you have a compass and a lineal, what do you call it, so you can draw a straight line.
Protractor. Yeah.
Roller, then you can really start to get in depth and find out that every letter comes from that system, especially the runes. But this is the way I got into it. But I met the Ordo Eldraku. It's an order with many lodges in Sweden. And I noticed that the writer of this book, The Night Side of the Runes, were written by the leader. The Night Side of the Runes. But the writer of this book was the head of the order.
And the head of the OTO back in the day wrote a book called The Night Side of Eden.
Yeah. I heard also on this podcast. You can see the night side. It's very strange, because I sort of got the feeling when I heard the premium show on there on Enslaved also, that I can see some kind of because Michael really goes into the night side of the lodges, so to speak, or it's a very, especially there in Germany, and how the National Socialism came to be and the actors behind it. I can sort of see the same forces working here.
Do you know why they chose to name themselves Draconian?
Well, that's when I googled Ordo Eldraku, I got the Order of the Dragon. It's and it says that
Dracul.
Yes.
Dracul, that's like Dracula.
Exactly. The dragon symbol is pagan also. It has to do with the fire spitting. The fire is also on the fire is also Odin in the paganism, and gold but also the sun, of course, and the lightning. But fire, gold, lightning. You also have sperm. Is a part of this. But the dragon spits the fire in symbolism is very phallus. But if it has wings, it's female.
Mm.
So it has to do with the original meaning, as I see it, has to do with fertility of the dragon. The dragoon is to draw, means to pull, and goon is like the gong or the goon when you come. You know, it's the dragoon system.
Mm.
When Gustav Vasa made the first military order here, he called it the dragon order, the dragoon fältet. They were trained at the dragoon felt. All this military system is coming from the Gustav Vasa II. The Gustav Adolf the Great, we call him, but he was the one that implemented sort of this military system that we have today all over the world. But it's based on the ranks and you know, everything involved is coming from paganism, but it's sort of flipped 180 degrees to become instead of a machinery or a force that creates children, it's a force that kills children, sort of, or kills.
Yeah, so
it's the opposite meaning.
Right. So there's an important thing to look at with the Crusades to the east, which happened after the conversion in 1050. With the research of Ralph Ellis, he talks about the Fourth Sect and other groups, and what we see is that it's one of these really sneaky things that you barely see in history unless you're looking for it.
It's the occult history.
What Ralph Ellis explains is that when the Christian church was created, they put up an iron curtain, so to speak, between east and the west. So Judea, everything east of a certain point, like east of Byzantine, I think, was completely sealed off because the church knew that they had dangerous ideas over there and they didn't want them getting through. So they put up this sort of like iron curtain, so to speak. Well, after the Crusades, that iron curtain was basically pierced, and all sorts of Gnostic sects and just a whole bunch of different sects sort of like snuck in to Europe, and they began to infiltrate everything. They infiltrated different orders. They infiltrated. They created new orders. They joined with the witches, and then when you look at the accusations towards the witches later on, and the Inquisitions, a lot of it was geared towards actual Gnostic sects. And a lot of the accusations were more along the lines of what for heretics, and the heretics were the ones who actually snuck in from the east. So a lot of girls today sort of have a wrong-headed idea when they look at the witch burnings as only being, towards women or whatever. There was actually a lot more going on with the underground sects and Gnostics and the Fourth Sect Uh, so the Luciferians as well. You had Luciferians popping up in the 1100s and 1200s. Like where did they come from? And you look at what they were into. I think that they're another example of a group that came from the East after the Crusades, because that Iron Curtain was pierced and broken. So there was nothing to stop all of these ancient sects from coming in. And the one thing that distinguishes these sects is that they're into things like castration, blood sacrifice, really crazy weird shit. So
like similar to the weird shit we see today when it comes to blood sacrifice and all of that.
yeah, so this stuff sort of like leached into our world after the Crusades, is the way I'm seeing it.
Yes.
And this may be the force that infiltrated the Templars. It's not. I don't think it's like
This is very possible.
the church. I don't think it's like the church coming back to infiltrate the Templars. I think it's these weird people from the East.
I
that
wonder I wonder who were like the first blood sacrificers culture, you know, because they say the Mexicans and all of those were blood sacrificing cultures, but they also said that the Vikings were the blood sacrificing cultures, and that's not the case in Sweden, at least. And I really doubt that it's the case in the Aztec, Maya, Inca empires also. I don't think, but it could have been converted much before. I don't know. It's very. It would be an interesting research to see where this come from originally. But it's very hard to tell because they want to rewrite or reportrait the history of the conquered nation, so to speak, to being like them, or that it has been a blood sacrificing culture. But it hasn't been like that. I mean, that's what I've been talking about when you look at symbolism. That they.
Well, you get that scene in the Vikings where they go to the temple and there's all of these really weird dudes there waiting for them with face paint, and they bring like 5 of their warriors and to lay them up on these altars, and the priests come around and cut their throats and hang them upside down, and that's their offerings to the gods. Is that what the Vikings were like?
No, but I think that it could have been accounts with their enemies to make us, because they were using fear tactics, the Vikings, against the enemies. Psychological warfare was the most, because they wanted to really terrify people to go into church. When Ragnar Lothbrok and his son Björn Järnsred were conquering the coastal cities in Mediterranean, they were really going after the churches and the church people, and to make to scare people to go to church. You know, they were attacking like not the ordinary farmers, but more of the cities. Yeah. And we have to remember that back in the days, the farmers and the ordinary peon didn't, you know, they didn't live so much in cities. At least not here in Europe. It was the aristocracy living in the city. For example, in Stockholm, it maybe lived 2,000 or 3,000 people there in the 1500s. And the Stockholm bloodbath, they kill around 100 people, or maybe more, but it becomes a percentage of the town when they kill like 100 people. So this is very important to have in mind when we talk about cities from before, it doesn't look like it does today. Because it's very class-based, at least in Europe. So, but when talking about this blood sacrificing culture, Caleb, the Night Side of the Rune book there and the author, they are also into the blood sacrifice. And I made a program on this, exposing sort of aspects of it based on my own experience. And you can see how the people
Did you
working with...
experience a blood sacrifice, Yaki?
Nah, but
No.
this become very personal in your life. You know, when I contacted the author there, I got immediately to some kind of secretary, and she wanted me to join into the cult to get further information about the paganism. So they wanted to like bring me in to the cult.
Right.
And then I was really repelled by that. So then I really felt like I hit a wall, because I saw that there's some there's something weird going on here. Because if you start to research and try to back what they are telling about the runes and the systems, it's sort of, they don't have any substantiality. Like because I wanted to find the natural way to discover why they are shaped like they are, and sort of really understand the reasoning behind the interpretation, and that's when I find flaws in their system. And I became very skeptical to the entire mythology that they were presenting. So yeah, I think you muted yourself, Caleb.
Yeah, I'm walking, and it got loud, so I muted myself. But,
But anyway,
so-
to finish this off, I mean, they're using the same symbolism like the original pagan, so to speak. Or if you look at it from the Bock Saga perspective, for example, it's the same kind of symbolism, and it has been forged into architecture and in emblems, heraldry, and by my understanding, the Jarls of Europe and the monarchs, not the real monarchs, but all monarchs in Europe are really Jarl families, except the Danish line, the Danish monarch. That comes from the original.
So to
Original
you, does it
monarch.
sound to you like a valid possibility that the first half of the Christian era, all the way up to the Crusades, was cut off from the East, and after the Crusades, a barrier came down which allowed Eastern groups to migrate into the West, groups who used a similar type of symbolism and organization, but which were into blood sacrifices. And when they got to Europe, using the same sort of symbolism and iconography and organization, blended in a way which is very hard for us to track looking backwards at it.
Yes.
But yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, I think if you look at it, you can only tell from mythology if you look at it from this perspective, because the symbolism is there, and it's very universal. You can see like the flower of life symbolism. It's a natural thing to come to, I think. anyway, but like the swastika is very specific. And what more type of symbols do we have? Like, yeah, I mean, simple symbolism, like the pyramid also, the cross symbol, especially the medicine wheel cross. This kind of symbols are very simple, and it's if you look at it from the Book Saga perspective, you can see that all races on the planet come from paganism. But in that mythology, the change started in India to become a religion. And this is many thousands of years ago, by the time of Krishna. And yeah, it's very far back. I think it's like 3000 BC or something like that. I'm not really sure, so don't take it. But it's very long time ago. So, but I wonder where this blood sacrificing thing comes from, because I think they have to go with this kind of symbolism, because the more heathen forces has been working on building up within architecture, and so they use the symbols of the old heathen world with dragons and animals, you know, the bull or the goat, the lion, all this kind of animal symbolism, or iconography, you can say. Because in the heathen world, it was a big tradition to symbolize or have costumes, even, where you have are dressing up as animals. And it has to do with that mankind is a sort of a lost, or it's not a very natural species. It differs so much from the rest of the animal kingdom. So in order to try to reach back to the more natural ways of the natural order, so to speak, on the earth, we should, we are very complex animals, but we don't really consider ourselves animals. Wild children and so are deemed to be animals, and it's a But anyway, to this kind of symbolism that I'm talking about seems to originate from the more primal human being that has been with us for a very long time. But it exists even more advanced type of symbolism also. But this more universal seems to be, with the phallus symbolism and yeah, the stuff we take for granted. We just see the pillar, of course, it's a pillar. But
yeah, we used to draw those on everything.
Yeah. But what I'm talking about is that you have to work within this, because as I see it, the heathens created this first kind of organization that was, because the Templar or Masonry forces are pyramid structured, exactly like the heathen world, and this is the system that they used already in the pagan world. So it was very natural to just go underground with the same kind of system, but in a hidden way. And those forces has been surviving, as I see it, all the way up to at least the Russian revolutions and the French revolutions. Then I heard that the more heathen forces moved to America in the 1800s. But when the societies like in Sweden, Stockholm, the different nations, or the riken, for example in France, Denmark, Ireland, Scotland, Russia, all those countries that the heathen forces sort of operated, they created also symbolism all over the towns and so. And when those the infiltration you're talking about there in the east, with the Crusades, or that some kind of that they could be creeping through. I don't know what happened there. I have never really read about that you're talking about, so it's very interesting. But I'm just trying to explain why I think they have to go with the same kind of symbolism, because blood and sperm and swords and all this kind of what we refer to as war stuff, the sword symbol, the shield, the helmet, the lance, the archer, the bow and arrow, all this kind of symbolism has to do with fertility within the pagan world, for example.
Well, why did they use weapons as fertility symbols?
That's a very good question, but I think people fought in a more symbolic manner, because if you had the riders coming down, you could see straight away what they represented, and they also had talismans that represented how much soul power you had, or this is me thinking very freely, but if you look at the Bock Saga, for example, you can see that they had a Thor system. That you had a Thor friend that you were touring around with, and you were assigned a Thor friend that were giving you a nature gift, and you gave him a nature gift in form of talent. For example, if you are a good singer and I'm good with the guitar, then if you're really interested in learning guitar, I can teach you to play guitar, and then in return you help me to be better to sing, for example. And this kind of system, at the end of a 3 years period, they gave each other a necklace or a token of friendship. So you can see there that the talismans and symbology within different kind of minerals and so were the way the culture sort of worked, or it was a big part of it, with symbolizing by dressing yourself up or having this kind of symbolic things, like talismans.
This is sort of veering way off a subject, but I'm curious if anything about the Scottish clans has sort of stuck out to you.
The Scottish clans.
Because the Scottish clans, they had a lot of good things going for them. They also love to invite each other over to parties and then massacre each other and do all sorts of nasty things to each other. But they had a thing going for them. It was larger than a family because it was a clan. There was clan territories, had castles.
Oligarchy almost.
Yeah.
In a modern sense.
So they were related, but they had territories to their clans, which is kind of family, but it's bigger than family,
Yeah. I
so
mean,
they were able
it's a dynasty that has grown very large, perhaps.
Yeah. Has anything stuck out to you about it?
I haven't read
in particular?
or I haven't focused anything on Scotland, to be honest. But I'm really drawn to Ireland and Scotland culturally. I've been to Ireland in Dublin I went there solo. But in the Bock Saga, both Scotland and Ireland are really close to. They are descendants, or they come from the Swedish Empire, in the Bock Saga. It's like not colonies, but satellite Reich or Riken, you could say. At least from the Bock Saga. So that's and you can hear in their English that they are a little bit different from the British type. Scottish and Irish is pretty close, I would say, right? In the compared to the British.
I wouldn't say close, but if you're going to compare it to British, then I would say, yeah, they're pretty close compared to the British.
Yeah. So it sort of backs up also the Box Saga perspective there, that they should originate from the same source, because in this saga the British come from the Danish, and it's two different kind of the Swedish and the Danish are they are different. They are different races, so to speak, or different folk.
What about Norway?
Swedish.
Swedish. Yeah.
But they were occupied by Denmark for some time, so I can understand perfectly what a Norwegian is talking about, and a Norwegian.
In the United States, I noticed that you generally find two types of faces, where either the nose is sort of like straight all the way from the forehead down to the tip. It's like no curves or anything. But then other people, they have like this dip right below their forehead. It dips and then it comes back again and keeps going to the point of the nose. And if it's got the dip, then the eyebrow line of the forehead is like sort of flat. Whereas if it doesn't dip, then it like the eyebrow line curves in. You know what I mean? Like to the nose, curves down. Yeah. So there's like two different strains there. I don't know what it means.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, there are 3 original strains according to the Finnish mythology Box Saga, and it's the Finnish, which is the Russians and the Finns. But you have the Swedes, and the Scottish and the Irish, and then you have the Danish, which is also British, and the Germany, and sort of branching out from there. But that you had 3 difference. I've been talking about this before with the 3 crowns symbol, and the 3 different Nordic monarchs, and the last surviving that is still here, of what I know, is the Danish, but it's gonna sort of die out with the Margaret, because there's also the original sperm line, so to speak. I think she's called Margaret or Margareta, I think, or Dagmar maybe. I don't know. I shouldn't say. But the Swedish royals, the Linga ett is called. It's symbolized by the lingon. It's a red little berry, lingon sylt.
So you were talking about the Y chromosome and the sperm line before. There is something that the female passes down, which stays, and that's the mitochondria. So from the male, you get the Y chromosome, and that always goes straight down through the lineage. And for the female, it's the mitochondria, which the X chromosome is kind of unreliable, because the X chromosome that you get from your mother, you actually don't know whether it's the X she got from her dad or the X that she got from her mom. It could be either one, so it like gets impossible to track. So the X chromosome, as far as tracking, forget about it. The Y chromosome, obviously you can track it straight through, father to father to father to father. Well, the same thing with the mitochondria. It's a separate thing, but it is a genetic code, and even you got your mitochondria from your mother, but if you have children, you won't pass that mitochondria down.
I see.
It'll be, yeah, but it's like, it's kind of the same.
That's interesting.
Only in the case of the mother passes the mitochondria down to all of her children, whereas you as a father, you will only pass down your Y chromosome if you have a son.
Okay, yeah,
If it's a daughter, yeah, if you have a daughter, she's not going to get your Y chromosome.
That's super interesting. It's amazing that you have been looking this up.
I was thinking though, it would be probably better if daughters got the last name of their mother, and fathers or sons got the last name of their father. Then it would be like tracking accurately certain lines, whereas the X chromosomes, you never know what's going to happen to them because they get dropped off and you can't really track it. But if you did that, at least you would know.
This is super interesting, Caleb. I was thinking about on the female side, they had it was very hard, or not hard, but a mother produced a lot of children, and they are called. They want to reach to become like a what do you call it? Stem mother. So they have some kind of tracking system within the pagan world also, that the mothers become stem mothers, because we didn't have last names in the pagan world. We only had like the names. The last name, if you look at Ragnar Lothbrok and you look at his son, he's called Björn Järnsed, a complete different aftername, but it's more of a title, the aftername, I think. Lothbrok could mean to break a lot, and Järnsed means iron seed. Also, it's interesting because you're naming everything according to their purpose, even people, I think.
Yeah,
it's the same. Yeah, it's the same with locations that are pagan. But if you're going back to the draconian part here and the more depressive stuff, I mean that it seems to be that they need to work within the symbolism that the Templars are using, or the Masonic forces, because as I see it, the Masonic forces that are heathen, they started really early here in the north, and ultimately took back power for a while in the 1500s, at least in Sweden. So Sweden is riddled with pagan symbolism, because those kings, the Vasa kings, they created many new towns in Sweden, and they incorporated the paganism or the pagan words into the streets, and the city planning and everything is a construction that can be flipped 180 degrees to become a pagan system, even within the military system.
What good is it to do that when you have to operate under
they couldn't
Christianity?
Yeah, but they didn't need that anymore in Sweden. They became very bold in that way here in Sweden. It's very kaxigt, also very high on horses attitude, with good with very it's when the system was created, I mean, almost every new invention that came from here almost after that, because they started to go back and take the implemented knowledge from before into the society. So the society became a well-oiled machine that was working really fucking good here in Sweden. you can see the development in 100 years. They sort of no other nation had this capacity to stand back against the Swedish forces in warfare, example, because of the inventions
Well,
of new weapons and so.
So, where on the timeline do you put the beginning point of the draconian influence in the West?
That's a heavy question. I tend to only look here in Sweden, of course, and I see this happen. I've been researching this quite. It happens with the assassination of Gustav III. But of course, this infiltration had already began before the assassination, because it was groups here in Sweden, family, noble families that were sort of corrupted, or it only took a small, like 10 or 15 people to do this coup, because Sweden was very small. And this has been my area of research the last many months, to look at the infiltration and the fall of the Vasa dynasty and the more friendly forces, or the original pagan forces here in Sweden. And it's only via the book Saga that I can sort of make this leap of faith to really look at the Gustav Vasas and see what they have been doing, because in my mind before I knew about the Vasa connection to the old paganism in Finland and all of that, I sort of never really was interested in the Swedish history in that way. But to see
we definitely see a turning point with his assassination.
Yes.
But why do you say it was the Draconians, and what exactly did they do after the assassination that gives it away?
Well, we can see how the forces within you can see in the beginning of the 1800s here in Sweden, the Futhark system there and the runes, this started to become a thing. You can see it starts around the 1800. This entire philosophy, or the thinking that the Viking shows and Vardruna, every band that draws from this seems to be looking at the 18th century literature, and the Edda, of course. But if you look at the Edda, it's very easy to interpret in your own way. If you look at the original scripts, I mean, Iceland could have been. I don't, Caleb, this is really. I've been focusing more on the actual power, and this is a research that is gonna take a really long time. But to see who were the actors behind the conspiracy to take out the Vasa dynasty, and you can see that the powers that did that still are in power in Sweden today. Especially the Wallenberg family. They were a part of the conspiracy to. They went against the monarch, the Vasas, and they own the Riksbank, which that's the first thing that Gustav Vasa also did. Besides going after the churches and melting down all the cannons, the bells, and taking all the gold and silver from the churches. They also, it was really important to start creating money, like copper mints and so. So at some points the power base hasn't even been all the time in Stockholm, because they wanted to be as close to the mint where you created the money as possible, because that's where the real ground working power resides. Because And you can see that the Wallenbergs that were a part of the conspiracy against the Vasas, they took charge of the money making also, and they own the Riksbank that creates the money today in Sweden. So you can find everything on paper, and that's what I intend to continue to do, because this is not pleasant made up things. It's just
Right.
and others in Sweden has also noticed this, and everyone that has been going against the Wallenbergs has had consequences in some form or another for it. It seems to be a really big force that are they were instrumental in creating the Bilderberg Group, for example. It's very interesting, but I sort of stepped away from this more blood sacrifice thing, and because I was so sick of all of that kind of. But it's worth taking a relook now when I have more flesh on the bones, so to speak. Looking at the late 1700.
Yeah, see if they have history going back to maybe the time of the Crusades or something like that. But as far as that concept goes about the Iron Curtain concept of the Middle East being sort of cut off, that may not even be completely true, because I was sort of clicking back through certain lineages on Wikipedia, as you can look somebody up on Wikipedia, and you can click on their parents, and then you can click on their parents, and then click on their parents. I did that for some of the old royals, and it seemed like right around 600s AD, like 650 AD, right around then, that there were certain families who came from Babylon right at that point. Like, you would have all of these Western names like John the Third, John the Second, John the First, and then all of a sudden, once you got to 650, it was like, some weird,
that's
some
very
weird
interesting.
freaking, yeah.
But Caleb, I'm gonna let you continue to speak. I just need to go to the toilet. Be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, the Iron Curtain concept may not be completely true, because there does seem to be something that happened right around 650. And I'm not so familiar with history in that time zone. That's the center of the Dark Ages. Dark as in, we don't necessarily know a lot about what was going on back then. Sure, there's a lot we could find out through records.
I'm back.
So it would be interesting to know if certain families did actually come from Babylon or the Middle East or something. That might end up telling us a lot. I'm not sure what it would tell us at this point, but it might tell us something.
It's so hard to research very far back, but the names and
well, it does seem that the groups that did come in from the East had this uncanny ability to blend in really well once they got here.
I'm thinking about this thing that I've been hearing that there are two kinds of Jews, for example. One original Jew, which is the more Indian, from India, the Cobra Gypsy or the Gypsy. But you also have the white Jew coming out of Russia. I mean, if you look at it, this is just speculation, but if you do this kind of what do you call it's eating in, as they say. If you mix people, you sort of tend to blend in better. I don't know, it's because if you look at the, like 1800s, the race debate is very normal to have. It's only in today's climate it's very taboo to talk about race even. But it was very natural before to distinguish people between races, even up to the 60s in Sweden. I mean, my grandmother had never seen a black guy or any foreign guy or girl at all up to the 60s. There was only Swedes in Sweden up to the 60s, for example. Well, we had also the Lappi people, or the Sami people, who are living far north, like more of a Tibetan culture almost, but very distinguished from the Swedes. But anyway,
You know, I'm curious. In the days of the Ringlands, the communication would each and every single Ringland had a direct line of communication with the northern Ringland, the very top one.
yeah.
But would your Ringland over in Sweden have any sort of contact with my Ringland over here in America?
I mean, if you look in the mythology, you have to go all the way back to before the Ice Age, when it was a more global network and one race of people from this story. But after the Ice Age, all the races, or the people, it's almost like the story of the Tower of Babel, you know. The people were divided and speaking different languages and becoming like separated from each other. And that's really what the Finnish mythology also talks about, that after the fall of the planet or the galaxy, the tilt or the Ragnarok, the first Ragnarok they say in the Nordic, we got separated from each other, but the top ringland of the previous civilization, the head of that civilization, were seated in Finland, and it was very hierarchical, but hierarchical in a biological way, due to the pagan system with a class society. But they call it the Asgård or the Midgard in the mythology. It's the top ringland, the Asgård, where the As people lived. They spoke a different language than the rest of the planet, which is now, you could say, the Germanic language group, but they call it the Aser language, the original form, which is the type of Swedish they speak in Finland, but also in northern parts of Sweden is very strong dialect of that. But then the rest of the planet had the Van category, or the Van language, the one language. But the As people, of course, created that language out of the Aser language. So it's the Finnish language is the Van language in its more original form. And you can find the entire society structure within the Van language, the Finnish language. So if you're a Finnish-speaking person that also speaks Swedish, then you have both of the keys to all languages on the planet, according to this mythology. But of course, due to time and separation and further separation, you can see that more languages are created and drifting apart from each other. So I think this has been a part of the Templars or the hedonistic forces to kind of restore languages. You can see that a restoration of the Swedish language, for example, has been happening.
Did you just call them the Templar hedonistic forces?
Yeah, I could say.
It's a good way to put it.
I mean, the subversion or the infiltration is very cunning forces, and you can see on the dollar bill in America, for example, that the top pyramid, there's a top pyramid within one big pyramid, but it's sort of lifted up and not attached to the entire base, right? And there's an eye inside of the top pyramid. And this is what I suspect happened if you infiltrate from the top. The rest of the structure wouldn't notice really. And it's a part of the secrecy also, to not reach the source of power. And this is how the Western world really operates. It's based on Templarism. Entire Europe, Sweden, is built by Templars. The Vasa
But
kings.
not the original Templars.
No, I don't. I think. Well, I can only speak for Sweden on this matter. I can see that the Vasa kings has been building Sweden to what it is today, with the fine machinery of the society, so to speak. But it has of course been developed and further expanded on. But the original statsapparat, also the state apparatus, is built by the Vasas. And I think it's I think it's a last stand almost, or it's a stand that is very Viking-ish, to sort of play the enemy's game. And over time change it. But it's very cunning people that has been taking over the seat of the economical system throughout Europe. Tend to be seated in Stockholm. It happened something there in the 1600 that I haven't really researched, but the Riksbank is the first central bank in the world, or it's a very strange thing that happened during the 30 years wars in Europe, where the leaders was the Vasa family. They call him the last Feldherre, or the last field. Herre is like a they call him like the last actual front, like Aragon, for example. He runs in the front, you know. That's how he also is portrayed to do. He was a commander that was in the front line, but also the king of Sweden. It's a rallying, and the Irish and the Scottish were main ralliers to his cause. And he used effective propaganda also. That was a kind of a new thing because of the printing press and that. But very interesting time to research from this kind of perspective, that they wanted to liberate Europe from the Catholics. But what came instead? I mean, if he was so cunning and already been kicking off with the statsapparat in Sweden, he sort of created this bank also, of course by help by councillors and so in Sweden, which is another subject. But it sort of happened something that tied up those European nations to Sweden in some fashion, I think. And it's very underground. Interesting. It has to do with money and money lending, because Sweden was first with paper money also. The dollar, which you call dollar in America. Swedish dollar. But it's just been sort of my focus to... I don't used to go into more modern age, but this kind of research I've been doing from the past has now starting to reach like the present. with tracing the Vasa line.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked about the Wallenbergs there and the influences of Ericsson and the companies that. I mean, I should make a long program on all that actually, because it's really interesting details to go thoroughly into the ties to Europe and even Middle East. They call Sweden an humanitarian superpower.
Oh, what now?
Humanitarian superpower.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, so much weird things is coming forth now, being exposed. It's just. But we have sidetracked totally from this draconian. But I think this is very related because it's so intertwined to each other. I think.
Oh, what defines draconian for you?
Well, first of all, I know that there has there's been like an infiltration on in the orders, very clearly, and when they take over, they want to impose their agenda, and it's kind of feels like very anti-humanist or at some times. But this is where it gets really tricky, I think, because if I would have been able to expose them exactly, I mean, that's like they are avoiding at all costs to being exposed, I think. And when they have control over the infrastructure, like the internet, they can filter out a lot. I mean, the Wallenbergs could even be like a scapegoat.
But then again, they could be so busy filtering out.
Well, they are making a dynasty. They have a dynasty already, and they have meetings within the dynasty. So they are really active in still today, like even before, because the dynasty has been growing, and it takes time to build a dynasty. Take a couple of 100 years, and they are like only 200 years in building this dynasty, from what I know. When I try to research like the Wallenbergs, for example, I cannot find one thing previous to like 1700. I know that one of them was a spy master in the East India Company. He copied all the letters, going through, a really sneaky person. And when they took power in Sweden, it didn't take long before the telecom company came, and I suspect they have been tapping into all communication going across the technologies that they have been owning for 160 years, even up to today. This kind of, when that they want to look into what people are doing, this kind of, what do you call it, Big Brother?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it has been going on for around over 100 years. That kind of activities. And they are the owners of the technology, seated. So the real power is really about information when it comes to like geopolitics and so. So they have a tremendous amount of power. I even heard that. Have you heard about heavy water?
Yeah.
It's a key component in creating the nuclear bomb. And it can only be found in the mountains between Sweden and Norway. I guess who owned all the factories that they were producing heavy water?
Let me guess.
So during the Cold War, if you have that kind of power to sit on the key ingredients to be making the nuclear bomb, you can pretty much you have ultimate power. So this leads us to even more questions. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting subject, I have to say. To tracing this family. I mean, it's almost ridiculous how corrupt Sweden is. I would say it's like the most corrupted country in Europe.
Which kind of begs the question: was it actually a good idea to set it up as being a well-oiled machine in the first
No.
place?
This is sort of a theme of the pagan forces, that what they do always is a double-edged sword, you know. So
Yeah.
so when they swing, the swing comes back.
Right.
So, but I also see it as an extens. It's almost, if you look at America, it feels like a very desperate move. A very hasty creation, not so well thought maybe, but it's a very open, and I think they are so cocky that they think that they would outperform the other forces, but they need a playground. So everything is a two-edged sword by now. But yeah, this is really big questions to ponder on, Caleb. I mean, we're sort of taking all the concepts into one mash here.
Yep.
My brain is like, boom.
Yep.
Yeah, but if you start to think, especially when I think it's really joyful, or not. I really enjoy researching this because it's so tangible. I don't need to speculate anything, almost. Well, the speculation leads you to research more. But could that be? Could that be? But I see that others do a really good research on this also, that is ongoing still. And there's writings from the past also, but they have often been very suppressed because it's so totalitarian here in Sweden. Even Jurelina's book you can't buy. It's suppressed. Like in Russia. I mean, you have to contact the author to even get a hold of a copy, because they won't have it on any shelf.
You can't buy it on Amazon?
I don't know if you can buy it on Amazon, but you cannot buy it within Sweden from any publisher or a bookstore here.
Oh well, same here. They're not. They have. They only put retarded books on the shelf over here. Yeah. If you want to buy a book, you have to order it online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have the signed version, so it was better to go through Jurelina anyway.
I have his stuff on PDFs.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think his
You
work
gotta-
is really important, to be honest. I mean, he
gotta check
dedicated
out-
his life to it.
Got to check out Fire and the Minds of Men as well. That one is tracking all the different secret societies during the French Revolution.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a book for me, I hear.
You'll probably find all kinds of treasures in that one.
Do you have that? Our copy?
I got a PDF.
Okay.
on it. I could get it to you.
That would be really interesting. I mean, to actively research, I mean, it's nice if people get involved. I mean, that's why we even do those kind of talks, I think, to get people involved. Not.
You know, I can't really read anything written these days
Yeah, I'm very bad at that
because the
too.
language has just like been dumbed down so much
Hmm.
that I love reading a book that's at least 80 years old. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting that you say so, because the books that I have been reading most on Swedish history are like maybe 70 years old, 80. Yeah.
Yeah, right in that neighborhood.
I know that Jim Chesner, he had a Swedish English translation book, and he said to me that it has to be before the First World War for it to be accurate. Um, like pre 1900s or around that, not after that, because they have been changing some words and so to have a different meaning after that. So you can sort of see a fall of the Swedish language from its origin, or the more perfect form, according to Jim. It's starting to happen around the world wars, the First World War at least. Um,
Well, the same thing's happening here, sort of like the word argument. Um, most people associate the word argument with two people yelling at each other or whatever,
mm,
when actually what you and me have been doing is kind of been fluxing in between discussion and argument a little bit. It's all it is just mixing ideas
mm.
until a better idea comes out of it. You know,
Dis-
that's what an argument is.
a diskussion, we
But
call it.
a what?
A diskussion, discussion, but disc,
Yeah.
to spin around.
But they've tainted the word argument with this aggressive meaning,
Hmm.
meaning that it's like this poisonous argument that two people are having and they can't come to terms. So you see that a lot with all sorts of words that just don't mean what people think they mean.
You can see this with like the Trump versus Clinton. You can see it here on the left versus the right. That they want to politicize everyone, so it kind of infects the the social climate between people too. That everything has to be politics and argumenting and discussion. So it's very a poison to society, I think. You create different groups that argue, that doesn't argue. They are just going along with everything, no discussions in that way. Perhaps, it's it's very politicizing, because when I grew up, people could talk to anyone in the same big group, or the same class, so to speak, or the I mean, it was a different social climate when I grew up, and then all this politics and politicizing the people. I mean, it infects also the ordinary debate or conversation, I would say.
Sort of like taking the population and gold panning it, where you get all the sand and everything in that pan, and you just start shaking the pan, and the heavier things start going in the middle, and everything else starts going out towards the edge, and then you get the gold right there in the middle, and everything just separates into its various
Mm.
constituents. That's kind of what they're doing to the population is uh,
Radicalizing, and you can see with the YouTube algorithms too. You only get what you have been looking at. You see, people get really radicalized. in many forms. Have you noticed that with the algorithms, especially on YouTube, that they do this also? If you only look at one certain party in Sweden, for example, you will only get videos that are aligned to that, you know. So
Kind of, yeah.
you get, yeah.
I've sat there listening to the music streaming apps with people, and we would get advertisements about things that we were talking about, like it was listening
What?
to the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it'd play an advertisement and be like, what the fuck, man?
I was gonna put our shows up on Spotify, but I got a decline. It took like 5 days for them to validate it, and then I got
Wow.
yeah, then I got like nope, and I was like, what? In the best case, it's sort of conflicting with that I already put it on the YouTube, but I don't know, man.
Well, hey, man, I got a lot to do today.
Yeah, I felt that we needed to round off anyway. We sort of drifted away from the subject anyway.
No, it's good though. Those were things that we touched upon a little bit in our trilogy, and I wanted to jump back in and sort of polish them up a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, we tend to look at it from different perspective and angles, but yeah, it's sort of the same theme anyway. Yeah, I think it can be useful to. It takes like a month, and then you make a new. Then it becomes very fresh, also, or even longer time. It grows, the conversation.
I thought you were talking about tea.
Yeah, that too. I was actually drinking tea here.
Yeah. I got this. I got dinosaur tea.
And what's that?
I'm just kidding. It's actually colloidal minerals.
Oh.
But they get it from dinosaur compost.
Whoa.
So they found this mine out in Utah, and what it was is an ancient rainforest back in the dinosaur days, like 70 million years ago. But what happened is like some big upheaval happened, and it got covered with a slab of limestone, like the whole forest. But that forest was preserved under the limestone. So the soil 70 million years ago was very, 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 very rich. So it's been sitting there all this time, preserved, and now it's just like this crumbly shale. So they gathered that up and literally soak it in water like tea, and all of these colloidal minerals come out of it. So it's like brewing tea, basically, and then they pasteurize it and has all of the minerals in it.
Well, that's interesting. Nice.
So literally, it's compost water. It's dinosaur compost water. It's good.
I could recommend buying some green tea to add to that.
Yeah. I bet. Yeah, I love green tea.
I mix a lot of different things into my tea. Also like different herbs. And I have locally produced honey also that I put in sometimes. But the thing I miss is the mineral, and you sort of have that. Before you have the brown water from the well that has the mineral, but...
you got, don't you have glacial water up there?
Yeah, you could get that.
Yeah, I hear that if you get the water that comes out from under the glaciers, it's got minerals in it.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think all streaming waters should contain some minerals, more or less.
More so with the glaciers, because it literally is grinding the rocks down
that's
to
true.
fine. Yeah.
And it's contained within the ice also. Probably.
A little bit. I think they call it glacial milk, actually.
It must taste very specially, perhaps.
Yeah, go find some. Let me know.
Yeah, on the Norwegian side here, you drive on top of a glacier at one point, I think. Yeah. Hey, Caleb, go to your thing. We can continue another time.
All right, we should get back on and talk about ice fishing sometimes.
Of course, we can talk about anything. It feels like so.
All right, man. Have a good day.
You too.
Later.
Thank you for this time.
Alle Monats stella di fram, ogni giorno spillo